So, for those who haven't been keeping up with Warhammer 40k or my videos on the topic, the Leagues of Votann are back. And who are the Leagues of Votann? Well, they're the squats. They're basically the squats. That's right, baby. The squats are back. And it's pretty history-making, honestly. I don't think I've ever seen an army get rebirthed back into the world after they were squatted. We're gonna need another word for that, by the way. I propose Beasts of Chaos. It doesn't have quite the same ring to it. And a few months back, when the Leagues of Votann were first announced by Games Workshop, I created a video on the topic provocatively titled, Why I'm Not Excited for Squats. And it had this thumbnail, which you can see pretty much describes the content of the video. Here I am, I'm not very excited, there's a squat, a big arrow pointing to him. Throw a few dollar signs in there. Pretty good if I admit. Clearly, in this video, I'm not excited for the squats at all. But at the time, there hadn't been very many models revealed for the squats, so we didn't have quite the same perspective as we have today. Because now, it's different. We have entered Act 1, Scene 2 of The King in Yellow, and it is time for us to unmask. During the Nova Open last week, the Leagues of Votann were pretty much fully revealed in all their potential glory. The entire Leagues of Votann range has now been revealed for our eager balls of liquid. I have seen it all, and I now know it all. The army is the army. I have now seen what every single model for the Leagues of Votann looks like. And more than that, the codex for the Leagues of Votann has totally leaked. All of it is with us now. Talk about early access. Oh, don't you love to see it? I guess you won't have to buy that big army bundle after all. And I must admit, it is time for old Discourse to eat her humble desserts. Because I was wrong about the Leagues of Votann. Mea culpa. In my last video, I made a number of predictions. Well, it wasn't prediction, it was more like fears. And I got a few of them wrong. I got a bunch right, but I got a few wrong too. And I am never one to not show myself in the worst possible light. I mean, you've seen my thumbnails, right? So let's run through all the new Leagues of Votann stuff, and I shall confess to some sins. Can you tell I was raised in a Catholic household? Can you tell? Okay, Leagues of Votann. So first up, we have the Hearthkin. Continuing Games Workshop's need to invent words for everything, this is the core troop of the Leagues of Votann. And my opinion of these guys has not changed at all, one bit, one iota since my last video. I still think they look totally generic. They are incredibly boring. I still think they are a bit of a ripoff of the Terran Marines, only with less personality. Yeah, sorry, not hyped. They seem very derivative, lacking in character and personality. They don't excite me. What can I tell you? We've also seen the Enhir Hearthguard, and these models are rubbish. They're probably one of the worst sculpts the Games Workshop has ever made. I really don't like these. The shoulder pads are too big. They look like Warcraft style designs, like very reminiscent of 2003 Blizzard. The poses are so plain. The models are just flat. They actively make me not want to collect Leagues of Votann. These are like the most uninspiring models I've ever seen in my entire life. And I've looked through the Mantic range. Yeah, this exo armor, not doing it for me. Same goes for the Enhir Champion as well. It's just a very boring design. I feel like I've seen this like 1,000 times before in 1,000 generic video games. The one thing that stands out with this model is that it has a little bit of runic detailing going on, which looks a lot better than, you know, nothing at all. That said, the range is rescued a little bit with the Grimnir model. This model is without a doubt the best in the entire range. It is absolutely incredible. I go so far as to say it's an excellent model coming from Games Workshop here. I'm a huge fan of this, especially the alternative head, and I think that the rest of the Leagues of Votann range would have benefited from being pushed more in the direction of this model. We've got the North style runes, the overcloak. It's so good. I could probably do without the tactical rock to end all tactical rocks, but even the staff that this unit wields, I gotta say, it's totally badass. I really like this model. I think the pose is perfect, and honestly, I think it would fit right in like a D&D game. Don't like the robots though, which is probably one of the most disappointing things about this range. I said in my previous video that the robots could rescue it for me. I want the robots to look good. Yeah, not these. No. They look really dumb. And there's like no sense of momentum, no sense of propulsion from these models at all. They're just like there. Like a bottle of milk and a beige room. It's just like, what's the point in this thing? I will say though, I prefer the use of just overt flight stands compared to these robot models, which I don't even know what's going on here. At a glance, I thought they all had like one leg or a particularly large appendage. But I don't think these models look very good at all, and the lower half of them is incredibly busy. It draws away from the actual models themselves. Like seriously, imagine having models that are so bad looking that basically a bunch of junk underneath them draws your attention. Yeah, no thanks. The actual Iron Master that these models comes with looks okay though. Not really inspiring, just looks okay. I like his helmet. I'm always a fan of big trench coats ever since I saw that guy in the car park, but nothing else wows me here. One thing I have noticed with this range though is that in the lore, the robots of the Leagues of Votann are meant to be like fully fledged citizens, as equal as anybody else, but all of the models depicting them, they're like assistants and stuff. They still seem to be second-class citizens. Plus a bunch of them don't even have legs. They're not even allowed legs. I mean, I guess flying is better than legs. I like this guy though. This guy's the Khal, like Khal Drogo in a Game of Thrones. Though less horse lord, more power armor dwarf. Yeah, there's no real connection. I don't really like the rock formation, but I do like his thing. You know, I kind of dig it. It's like the thing above his head. You know that thing? The big phallic bit. I'm a big fan of that. I'm a big fan. It makes me think of Rohan, and Rohan was the coolest human faction in Lord of the Rings. Fight me. So that's good. Although I gotta admit, he does feel very much like a Space Marine captain. So that's a bit, The Chthonian Berserks are okay. I gotta admit, in my civilian life, I am a big fan of big hammers. Some of these have very specific poses. They look a little bit too specific for me. Especially the Fist Man. He's got like one leg up. To be honest, they make me think of a bunch of fellas in string vests. It's not the most inspiring thing in the world. Then we also have the Thunderkin. These were revealed as well, and I totally called it. I'm taking this one. I'm getting like a gold medal on this prediction. This is the Ripley suit that I wanted, that I asked for. Nice. I gotta admit though, I mean, like, such a suit kind of writes itself, really. I like the general idea of these models, but I'm not sure if actually in practice they work. There's just something very silly about guys in big power armor putting their big power armored feet into like little holders so that they can walk around in bigger feet. It's just, I don't know. It's the Primaris Interceptors all over again. Although I gotta admit, these don't look just intrinsically dumb. They do look pretty interesting. I actually kind of like these guys. We've also got the Mole Launcher, which apparently is a callback to some old squat weapon. This is a weapon team on a big base, and I usually love weapons teams. I had a mad love affair with guardsman weapon teams in the mid-2000s. It was a wild time for sure. Everybody else was pumping their veterans straight into the back of chimeras. Not me, not Discourse. I was going full infantry, spreading out all across the table with heavy weapon teams. I got slaughtered every single game, but I did it anyway for love. So in theory, I love my big bases, I love these models, but in practice, yeah. I don't get why they're a weapons team. It just feels like it's two fellas out for a stroll. I don't really get it. They feel very mobile. I just don't know why these two models are on a big base. I feel like they could have just been like two models. Besides, forget the Mole Launcher. That's taking up precious design space that should have been dedicated to a mole car. Yeah, imagine a transport that could dig underground and then come out. Ooh, that'd be pretty badass, wouldn't it? Bring me a devil's tongue! So that's all the infantry for the Leagues of Votann. And I gotta admit, the vehicles, in my opinion, look a lot better. Firstly, we have the Giant Buggy Fortress. That's its technical name. It was revealed at Nova Open as well, and I like it. I actually really like this model. The wheels are a little bit undersized for the girth that this vehicle's got going on. And the model overall is a little bit over-detailed. Very, very busy model for something that really should have a lot of flat panels. It's weird. I do like the turrets though. The amount of turrets here soothes my soul. And I love the sort of Soviet bubble boy aesthetic that's got going on. That said, I think the aesthetic is overall done better in the smaller vehicle that was revealed at Nova. This one here, it looks exactly like a NASA buggy. It's got a slightly sleeker, lower profile, I like that. And it has a little Millennium Falcon cockpit on the side, which yeah, I'm a big fan of. I'm not the biggest fan of the turret on top. It reminds me of the Scorpion tanks from Command & Conquer 4, which I really don't want to be reminded of. Reminding me of Command & Conquer 4 is basically the equivalent of leaping out of a pit while screaming at a Vietnam vet. Though it looks a lot better with the rocket attachment, so I'm gonna be taking the rockets if I ever build this model. Yeah! Rockets! Rockets are cool, man. You ever think about how cool rockets are? I actually really like this model. It has a very retro-futuristic feel, which is kind of what I'm getting now from the Leagues of Votann. I think they were going for that feel. And that's kind of why I'm so disappointed in these bikes, or the trikes, whatever you want to call them. I just don't like them at all. I don't like the fact that they're like hover vehicles. It makes them look really static to me. I don't get the sense of momentum from them at all. It looked like they're just kind of lazily floating down a river in a barrel. Massive miss for me. Which is a pity because the Genestealer Cult bikes that Games Workshop made like, well, a couple of years ago, absolutely incredible. Best bikes that they've ever made. So it's like night and day here. Overall, I gotta say for the Leagues of Votann, I'm kind of missing beards. I'm missing a lot of beard. I wanted more beards. Give me some beard action going on. Come on. Tell you what though, do you want to know who's the best looking model in this entire miniature range? This guy. Yeah, this guy, the exclusive, the September exclusive you'll never be able to get again. You just gotta go down to the Games Workshop store and pick him up. Very cool looking model. Totally should just be used as a promotion. Yeah, so sure. And actually, the fact that I really like this model kind of makes me think that if they had have taken the Hearthkin, the core troops, and just thrown dome head helmets and all of them, I think I might have been a lot more on board. So overall, what are my thoughts on the Leagues of Votann? Is that a thought? It feels more like a brain gloop. Honestly, I gotta say, every single time I saw a new reveal for the Leagues of Votann over the last couple of months, I kind of felt like I was looking at a Mantic model. Damn, I'm once again going hard on Mantic today. I just didn't get much of a vibe from these guys, you know? Like, in the lore, they're meant to be this ancient army of dwarves governed by crazy AI. From what I understand, they're like meant to be this big analogy on capitalism. That's what makes them so grimdark. They're obeying these rules even though they don't know why. I don't get any of that from the actual model design. Feels like the lore's over here and the models are over there. I just don't get it. For humans, they just feel very normal. They feel like very reasonable, just a couple of fellas down the pub. So my honest opinion is, I think the Leagues of Votann might have been the biggest miss for me from Games Workshop in all time. Except for Rubik Gulliman, I didn't like that at all. And the Primaris were a huge miss too. But, I mean, honestly, the Primaris are probably the best sort of thing to compare these guys with. That's who they remind me of. They remind me of Primaris Space Marines. They're power-armored models with big guns. Did we need more of that in Warhammer 40k? I don't think so. I'm kind of overloaded with that here. And I don't collect Space Marines. Really, to be honest, the most exciting part about the Votann to me is that we've got a bunch of new generic infantry for miniatures agnostic war games like 5 Parsecs from Home or Space Station Zero. Like, these guys will look great in Stargrave, which I must admit is really useful for hobbyists like me who play a variety of games. I might end up picking up some Leagues of Votann just to play them in other games. But I like Warhammer 40k. In theory, at least. And I think that these models really suck for anybody who was looking forward to the next aesthetic masterpiece from Games Workshop. When I first saw the Genestealer Cult buggies and vehicles and new units and models, I was blown away. I thought they looked incredible. And nothing from the Leagues of Votann has come close to that, really. Nothing at all. In fact, I would go so far as to argue that the Genestealer Cult represented a bold design choice from Games Workshop, that they were a very pure vision, and they were executed on perfectly. The Votann feel like the design direction for them was the hue as generic and marketable as possible. In short, okay, not intended. In short, the Leagues of Votann were designed to be as close as possible to Space Marines. But I didn't want new Space Marines. I wanted like chunky robot boys with runic inscriptions and the face of elders inscribed on armor. I wanted AI talking through carved faces that resemble giants. I wanted ancestral totems, runic axes, you know, like that's the vibe I like. And there's a little bit of it here in the range, but like not half as much as I would have enjoyed. And in terms of the sculpts themselves, a lot of the sculpts appear to be simply monopose. We've seen the Hearthkin sprues now. They're up on the screen, and yeah, they don't look great. They don't look fun to assemble, really. So all that is disappointing. But I was wrong about some stuff. Games Workshop showed me up. I said in my previous video that the Leagues of Votann would very likely fall to character bloat. Games Workshop would produce a bunch of models, like individual models, instead of doing a bunch of squads. They did this with the Genestealer Cult army. This is what I was basing my fear on. But that's not the case. That's not the case. We've seen the entire army range. The codex has been leaked. We know now it's a bunch of squads of infantry. Yay! Good! Awesome! I really like this. You have no idea how good it is to be wrong about Games Workshop for once. I am so happy about this. I'm so glad that the squats are an actual army, not just a bunch of specialists. Warhammer 40k is an army game. And I hate that so many options for the Genestealer cults are just like, here you go, here's the DJ unit. He's just some fella. He's a DJ man. I want like a squad of DJ man. Give me more DJ man. And I suppose that for the Genestealer cult specifically, it kind of fits for like an insurgency for them to have a bunch of specialist individuals, which ironically makes them play almost more like a hero faction than the Space Marines. Ooh. As opposed to like what a traditional army, like the Votann would have, which is more infantry. But there's a lot of commercial reasons why you would design an army to have single individual units in place of squads of infantry, and I am glad that Games Workshop did not take this decision. They could have saved a lot of money, and they could have had a functional army by doing this, and they didn't do it. They didn't choose to do that. So that's awesome. That's really cool. Now, that's not to say that it might not still happen. Just like the King in Yellow, the foul horror of the squats may not be revealed until the second act. I've been reading a lot of Chambers lately, can you tell? But for now, that's not the case, so I'm gonna celebrate that win while it's here. And there is a good foundation for an army here in terms of unit variety and diversity. I like the availability of units. Ultimately, I gotta admit, as much as I don't want another army in Warhammer 40k, because seriously, I feel like there's just way too many already, and they need to be like almost squashed down at this stage. I think we need I think we need to Beasts of Chaos a few 40k armies. I have to admit though, that the Votann do fill a sort of gameplay niche, or rather, that's not the right term, a commercial niche that no other army in 40k quite fills right now. Because as much as they seem to have taken the shooty bang bang Tau niche from the Tau, which is a separate thing we might need to talk about at some other stage. In terms of getting new people into Warhammer 40k, I think they might be good at that, I guess, is the best way I can put it. But I think that the Votann might be designed to be a very beginner-friendly faction, which is good, because there's not a lot of easy or simple factions in Warhammer 40k. The game as a whole does suffer from having way too much going on, especially needless, pointless things going on. Stuff that doesn't add to the depth of the game, it's just there. And for new players, especially younger players, Warhammer 40k is very unforgiving, and it's much too complicated to play. I had a friend recently, he was trying to teach his kid how to play Warhammer 40k. They played Grim Dark Future instead. It was just easier. The kid enjoyed that way more. And it used to be that if you were a new player and you were trying to get into Warhammer 40k, people would recommend that you play Space Marines. And it made sense why people recommended this. The Space Marines are a very forgiving faction, or at least they were. They were well armored. They were hard to kill. They could stand up to a bit of shooting. They didn't have too much complication going on. You had your shooty man, you had your fighty man, you had your spidey man, you had all sorts of mans, but no woman. Yet, however, the Space Marine Codex today is far too bloated to recommend to a new player. Oh, baby lord. There's just way too much going on in that codex, and there are lots of wrong decisions to make as well, which is probably the worst part. There are bad units in the Space Marine Codex. It's actually one of the worst codexes to look through as a new player. You're like assaulted with options. Too much. It's ivory tower based design. They give you so many options, and then a bunch of them are just wrong. And that's terrible for new players. I would not recommend the new players play Space Marines at all. Leagues of Votann, in contrast, don't have that problem. They're not as bloated, and they have very few options, at least in terms of the units they can play as. And that's good for new players. That's good to have less purchase options. It means you can't really go wrong. Though I can't help but think that the vast majority of new players are still going to gravitate towards Space Marines, and I don't think the marketing of 40k is gonna help dissuade them either. So maybe Games Workshop should have just purged Space Marines instead. Just went through them with a big old pair of scissors. So, in a way, I've kind of mellowed out on the Votann a little. Though there is something I have not mellowed out on, and that is Games Workshop bullshit. Seriously, this is so frustrating. In the announcement article for all of these new Leagues of Votann models, Games Workshop were already hyping up the ability for people to get early access to the codex and rules for the Leagues of Votann. They wanted you to buy a massive army bundle for, quote, early access to the codex. Well, how did that work out for you, Games Workshop? Because the entire Votann codex has been leaked onto the internet. All of it, every single little detail, every last drop. So, screw the early access, do not feel pressure to buy the army bundle, simply find the codex, download it, and read it at your leisure. Can't even flick through codices anymore in a store, and you're trying to sell early access. Oh, it makes me mad. Seriously, screw the early access model that keeps getting pushed by Games Workshop and seems to be now a cornerstone of every single major release of theirs. It really sucks for us, for consumers. It really sucks for new players. It takes away consumer choice by forcing us into making bigger purchases. We don't get to decide what we want our armies to be. If you buy the Leagues of Votann army bundle, that's the bundle everyone's going to have. It destroys variety. Our armies become cookie cutter, and let's be honest, most of the time when people buy these, they're just adding them to their piles of shame. It's just the cult of the new being pushed by Games Workshop. Big bundles like this can be really overwhelming, especially if your heart isn't 100% in it. So many of these models in this big army bundle won't even get completed by new collectors, I bet. They'll just contribute to a massive pile of shame, and then you just feel bad about your hobby. It takes away the joy from the thing. And we end up with just way too much on our plate. I don't know about you, I feel this a lot with these big bundles that Games Workshop are constantly pushing. I said it a year ago, I'm saying it now, like Games Workshop are gonna keep trying to make this a thing. They're gonna keep moving the needle further and further and further in their advantage. I've witnessed it happen in so many other markets, not least the video game market. So we gotta stand up against this. Every single time it happens, it has to be called out. It has to be made an issue. I suspect we're even gonna see this with the 10th edition of 40k next year, for real. I could see a massive box coming out with the 10th edition rules, and no way to get those 10th edition rules unless you buy the massive box. Hello, Horus Heresy. Oh, this is really, really frustrating, and it sours what should otherwise be fun releases. God, this hobby's meant to be fun. It's not meant to be putting stress and pressure on people. So help me fight this by checking out my Patreon at patreon.com/discoursminiatures, and there you can get ad-free content. And if you are interested in further discussion on this, why not check out my video where I go over the business practices of Games Workshop over the last year. That's there. And as always, a huge thank you to my patrons, especially Sonic Bread and Beauregard Equipment. Thank you so much, guys, and I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye!